Welcome to my channel. If you love your true crime dark, a little messy, and proudly queer, you're in the right place. And while you're here, be a dear. Hit that like and subscribe button and share it with someone who also lives for the drama. Hey queens, welcome in ghoulies. Hopefully you're all having a lovely year, and I'm just trying a new type of makeup, as always. This is my spring-based makeup. You can go to catch the video on my YouTube channel or Twitch channel if you would like to see the process of that. But let's get back to it. This is LGBT. Let's get back to talking. I'm Niko. Around here, we tell stories about queer lives, the ones that ended in headlines, or never made it that far. Some were victims, some were villains, most were complicated. So, pour a drink, take a breath. Let's get back to talking. Carl Panzram entered the world on June 28, 1892, on a small farm near East Grand Forks, Minnesota. He was the youngest of 6 children, born to German immigrant parents. By most accounts, the family was poor, overworked, and harsh. His father died when Carl was still young, leaving the household under the control of a strict and often violent mother. But whatever humanity Carl Panzram might have had began breaking very early. At just 11 years old, he was sent to the Minnesota State Training School for Boys, a reform institution meant to straighten out delinquent children. Instead, it brutalized them. Panzram later wrote that he was being beaten by guards, sexually assaulted by the older boys, and forced to live in constant fear. In his autobiography, he would later say, "I was whipped, beaten, starved, and abused until I hated every human being on earth." And if you read his later confessions, that hatred became the defining feature of his life. Not rage, not madness, hatred. Pure, sustained hatred. After escaping the reform school, Panzram became a drifter across America's railways. He rode freight trains across the country, stealing food, robbing houses, and setting fires for the sheer thrill of destruction. Before the age of 20, he had already been arrested dozens of times. His crimes included burglary, arson, robbery, assault, rape, and prison became the only stable thing in his life. He passed through a rotating system of jails and penitentiaries across the United States. And every time he came out, he seemed worse, more violent, more hateful, more determined to hurt people. At one point, Panzram would later write, "I have murdered 21 human beings. I have committed thousands of burglaries, robberies, larcenies, and arson. I've sodomized more than 1,000 male human beings." Those numbers are impossible to fully verify, but investigators would later confirm that at least several murders were real. In 1920, Panzram committed one of the strangest burglaries in American criminal history. He broke into the Connecticut home of former U.S. President William Howard Taft. Inside the house, he stole jewelry, valuables, and one item that would soon become infamous: Taft's personal Colt .45 pistol. Panzram sold some of the stolen items and used the money to buy a small sailing yacht. He named it the Akista. And what happened next would become one of the darkest episodes in his story. Panzram sailed the Akista along the East Coast, spending time near New York and Atlantic City. His hunting ground became the waterfront bars. There, he would meet sailors, lonely men, drunk men, men looking for company. He would invite them aboard his yacht. Once they were on the water, Panzram said he would get them drunk, sexually assault them, and then shot them in the head using Taft's stolen pistol. Afterward, he dumped their bodies in the ocean. He later claimed to have murdered 10 sailors this way. No bodies were ever recovered, and historians still debate whether all those killings actually occurred. But the pattern, the boat, the gun, the disappearances, has convinced many investigators that at least some of those murders were real. Eventually, the yacht ran aground near Atlantic City and was lost. But Panzram simply moved on to the next phase of violence. For a time, Panzram worked aboard cargo ships traveling internationally. During this period, he claimed to have traveled to Angola in West Africa. There he told one of the most disturbing stories in his autobiography. He said he hired 6 local men to help him hunt crocodiles along a river. Once they were all in the boat, far away from shore, he shot them one by one. Then he pushed their bodies into the water for the crocodiles. The killings have never been confirmed, but they are part of the long list of murders Panzram claimed responsibility for. One of the most disturbing cases linked to Panzram involved a 12-year-old boy named George Henry McMahon. Panzram confessed that he lured the boy away, repeatedly assaulted him, and eventually beat him to death with a rock. This man is a fucking vile piece of shit. This murder is considered one of the more credible cases tied to him, based on the details he provided. Another victim believed to be connected to Panzram was a 14-year-old newspaper boy named Alexander Lassac. The boy's body was found, wrapped in a blanket after being forced to assist in a robbery. Again, Panzram admitted to the killing, but by the time authorities investigated his claims, many of the crimes were already cold. In 1928, Panzram was arrested in Washington, D.C. after burglarizing a house. He was sent to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, and that is where one of the strangest relationships in criminal history formed. A prison guard named Henry Lesser began speaking with him regularly. Unlike most guards, Lesser treated Panzram with basic kindness. He gave him paper and pencils. Panzram used them to write a 40,000-word autobiography detailing his crimes and his hatred of humanity. In it, he wrote one of the most chilling lines in true crime history. "All of my life, I have hated everybody and everything." The manuscript eventually became one of the most infamous criminal memoirs ever written. On June 20th, 1929, Panzram attacked a prison employee named Robert Warnke. Using a heavy iron bar, he beat Warnke to death. There was no denial, no defense, no explanation. Panzram simply admitted it. He was sentenced to death almost immediately. Panzram refused every appeal. He refused to fight the sentence. In fact, he openly mocked people who wanted to save his life. When a prison guard asked if he had any final words, Panzram reportedly said, "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastards! I could kill a dozen men while you're fooling around." On September 5th, 1930, Carl Panzram was executed by hanging at Leavenworth Prison. He was 39 years old. Confirmed victims are Robert Warnke, the prison guard, murdered in 1929. Alexander Lassac, teenage newspaper boy. George Henry McMahon, a 12-year-old. He claimed to kill 10 sailors aboard his yacht, 6 men he shot and fed to crocodiles in Angola, multiple boys he murdered across the United States, and several robbery victims. Panzram confessed to 21 murders total, but Historians generally believe between 5 and 10 may be real. Carl Panzram is one of those cases that make people uncomfortable in a very specific way. Because most killers hide, lie, minimize. Panzram didn't. He bragged. He wrote everything down. And he never asked for forgiveness. Not once. In a twisted way, he saw himself as proof of what happens when violence creates more violence. A boy brutalized by the system, who grew up determined to brutalize the world back. If you are interested in the notes Carl wrote to his guard Henry Lesser, or the interview that Henry had later in life, I will link those below. You've been listening to LGBT. Let's get back to talking. I'm Niko, your host, your narrator, your slightly too interested gay friend with a microphone. And every week, we dig into queer lives brushed out of the margins, the victims, the villains, and the beautifully complicated ones who lived in between. If you liked tonight's story, go ahead and follow, subscribe, and leave a comment. Or just whisper sweet nothings into the void. I hear everything. Until next time, pour a drink, take a breath. Let's get back to talking.